The grief that made you psychic. Every loss opened a new sense. You didn't ask for this gift. It arrived unwanted, wrapped in black, delivered by hands that took more than they gave. While others spoke of silver linings, you were undergoing a more profound metamorphosis. Grief was not just changing your perspective, it was altering your perception. The first death cracked something open in you. The second widened the breach. The third, the one that brought you to your knees, finally shattered the boundary between worlds you once thought solid. What appeared to others as your unraveling was actually an unwilling initiation. The heightened senses of the grief touched. Grief doesn't just wound, it awakens. Like ancient tribal initiations that use physical suffering to open spiritual doorways, profound loss creates apertures in consciousness through which new awareness flows. The sudden knowing certainties that arrive without logical foundation yet prove themselves true. The visceral recognition, the ability to feel others' hidden pain like weather patterns moving through your own body. The dissolved timelines, moments when past, present, and future collapse into simultaneous experience. The truth behind words, hearing not just what is said, but the underwater currents of what remains unspoke. The visible threads, perceiving the connections between seemingly random events, the patterns invisible to those still wearing the veil of invulnerability. These aren't metaphors or poetic exaggerations. They are literal expansions of perception that often follow catastrophic loss, particularly when that loss defies meaning-making or occurs in quick succession. The neuroscience of grief's aperture. What mystics have known for millennia, science now confirms. Extreme emotional states create measurable changes in perception and neural processing. The grief-stricken brain exhibits heightened activity in the insula, the region responsible for interoception and empathic resonance. Altered default mode network functioning, changing how we process self-referential thinking. Disrupted filtering mechanisms, allowing sensory information normally deemed irrelevant to enter consciousness. Increased right hemispheric dominance, favoring holistic pattern recognition over linear analysis. Your psychic abilities aren't supernatural, they're supernatural. The natural consequence of a consciousness fundamentally reorganized by loss, operating beyond the narrow bandwidth of normalized perception. The ancient understanding. Indigenous cultures and wisdom traditions have always recognized this phenomenon. They don't pathologize the visionary capacities of the grieving, they honor them. The shamanic breaking that precedes shamanic power. The wounded healer archetype present across cultural mythologies. The initiatory sickness that signals one chosen by spirit. The recognition that those who have walked between worlds can thereafter serve as bridges. What modern psychology labels as complicated grief or traumatic dissociation, traditional societies often identified as spiritual emergence, the painful birth of expanded awareness. The gifts hidden in the wreckage. The perceptual shifts that follow profound grief include radical presence. When future plans have been obliterated and the past becomes too painful to inhabit, an unexpected door opens into the eternal now where intuitive information flows most freely. The death of denial. Having faced what others most fear, pretense becomes both impossible and pointless. This ruthless clarity extends beyond your own life, allowing you to see through others' illusions without effort. Boundary dissolution. The ego structure, shattered by loss, rebuilds with more permeable borders. Information that others would filter as not self flows through, bringing insights that seem to come from elsewhere. Pattern recognition beyond logic. Your unconscious mind, processing grief, works overtime, making connections your conscious mind would miss, delivering them as intuitive flashes rather than reasoned conclusions. Enhanced emotional resonance. Having inhabited emotional extremes, you become a tuning fork for subtle variations in the emotional fields of others, sensing shifts they haven't yet acknowledged even to themselves. When the gift feels like a curse, this perceptual expansion comes with profound challenges. The overwhelm information without filters becomes a sensory flood. The isolation, seeing what others cannot, means living partially in a world they don't inhabit. The disbelief, having your perceptions dismissed as imagination or projection. The responsibility, knowing things about others they may not be ready to know about themselves. The integration struggle, learning to live between worlds without fragmentation. This is why so many who develop these abilities following loss initially experience them as burdensome rather than beneficial, a cruel cosmic joke rather than a meaningful compensation. From curse to cultivation, transforming grief-induced perception from chaotic intrusion to coherent insight requires recognition. acknowledging these experiences as real perceptual shifts rather than imagination or madness. Grounding practices. Developing techniques to modulate the flow of information to open and close the aperture intentionally rather than remaining perpetually exposed. Discernment development. Learning to distinguish between genuine intuitive information and projection, between clear-seeing and fear-based imagination. Framework building. Creating or adopting conceptual frameworks that make these experiences intelligible rather than overwhelming. Guided integratio. Working with others who understand these shifts, whether therapists familiar with spiritual emergence or traditional wisdom keepers from cultures that recognize initiation through suffering. The Wounded Seer's Journey. This path shows you through loss. You did not seek it, would never have willingly paid its price. Yet here you stand, perception altered, awareness expanded, living between worlds. Your grief has indeed made you psychic, but not in the parlor game sense of that word. Rather, you have become psychic in its original meaning, of the soul. Your soul, cracked open by unbearable loss, now perceives beyond the material veil, sensing the undercurrents, patterns, and connections that most miss. This is not mental illness, though it can drive you there if unsupported and misunderstood. Nor is it simply magical thinking or poetic metaphor. It is a genuine shift in consciousness documented across cultures and increasingly verified by neuroscience that often follows profound grief. The question isn't whether this heightened perception is real, but rather, what will you do with this involuntary initiation? Will you pathologize yourself, seeking only to return to the comfortable blindness of before? Or will you integrate these expanded senses as the survivor's gift, hard-won wisdom earned through unimaginable pain? Every loss indeed opened a new sense. Now comes the sacred work of learning to see clearly through tear-blurred eyes.